When I stepped onto that stage today, I promised myself I'd tell you a story that doesn't just grab your attention, it shakes you awake. So imagine this. You walk outside one morning, the sun barely rising, the air still carrying that calm silence of a new day, and then you see it. The one thing that stood on your property for generations, your 200-year-old tree, your history, your pride, your family's legacy, lying on the ground like it never mattered. No warning, no permission, no explanation, just gone. Cut down by the HOA as if they were trimming a hedge. And everyone around you thinks it's just a tree. But what they don't know, what they couldn't even imagine, is that the tree they destroyed was worth $1 million, not because of money alone, but because of what it stood for, what it meant, what it protected, and the secret behind its value that they never bothered to ask about. Today, I'm not here just to tell you how they took something priceless from me. I'm here to show you what happens when life tries to cut you down the same way, and how you rise stronger, louder, and unshakable. Because sometimes the thing they destroy becomes the very thing that wakes up the giant inside you. When people underestimate your worth, their actions often reveal more about their limits than your value. And you don't fully understand this truth until life puts you in a moment where what you've built, protected, or cherished is treated like it never mattered. It's a strange feeling, standing there, watching someone make a decision about your life without knowing anything about the years behind it, the sacrifices within it, or the meaning attached to it. You start to realize that some people operate with a mindset so small, so limited, that they believe they can measure your value with their narrow rules, their shallow assumptions, or their rushed judgments. And the most surprising part is that they think they have you figured out. They think they know what matters to you, what you're capable of, what you can afford, what you deserve, what you'll tolerate. But the truth is, most people only see a fraction of who you are, and they make the mistake of believing that fraction is the whole story. What they don't realize is that your worth isn't something written on your face or hanging around your neck. It's not stamped on your house, your bank account, or your belongings. It's built quietly through resilience, through experience, through loss, through growth, through moments of struggle that never made it to the public eye. It comes from the things you survived, the failures you turned into lessons, the private victories that shaped your character, and the strength you learned to carry even when nobody believed in you. People who underestimate you don't see that. They only see what's convenient for them. They project their limitations onto you because they cannot imagine someone breaking through barriers they themselves would crumble under. When the HOA cut down that 200-year-old tree, they didn't think about its age, its history, or its value. They didn't ask questions, they didn't seek understanding, they didn't consider the possibility that something so ordinary looking might hold extraordinary worth. They acted from assumption, from power, from impulse. But what they really exposed was not their authority. It was their lack of awareness, their lack of respect, their lack of imagination. They revealed exactly how limited their vision was. And that's what people often do. They hurt you thinking the damage is small, because in their world, everything is small. They judge you by their own mind's ceiling, not realizing your life stretches far beyond the borders of their perspective. When someone underestimates you, they are not telling you who you are. They are showing you who they are. They are showing you the size of their thinking, the depth of their insecurity, the limits of their worldview. They are showing you how little they are willing to learn, how quickly they assume, how little effort they put into understanding anything outside their comfort. And sometimes you need people like that, not because they define you, but because they remind you of the distance you've grown from the kind of thinking that used to hold you back. They remind you of the strength you carry now compared to the weaknesses you once had. They remind you of your evolution. The truth is, the moment people underestimate you becomes a mirror. You see their doubts, but you also see your own progress. You see how far you've come, how much self-control you've built, how much clarity you've gained. You see that you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone because your life speaks louder than their assumptions ever could. And you learn that your value isn't reduced because someone fails to recognize it. Your value remains, your worth remains, your truth remains, even if someone treats it carelessly or judges it blindly. When your worth is hidden from others, it's not a disadvantage, it's a filter. It reveals who is driven by authenticity and who is driven by ego. It reveals who approaches with humility and who approaches with arrogance. It reveals who asks questions and who makes decisions based on their own ignorance. And the more life tests you, the more you realize that being underestimated is not an insult. It's a strategy life uses to show you who doesn't belong in your circle, who cannot handle your growth, who would mishandle your blessings, who would stand in your way if they knew your full potential. People will always underestimate what they cannot understand. They will always misjudge what they cannot see. They will always assume less when they are incapable of imagining more. And the day they act on those assumptions, when they cut down your metaphorical tree, when they cross a line without hesitation, that's the day their limits become clearer than ever. That's the day you realize their perception is too small to impact your destiny, even if their actions cause temporary damage. Their decision doesn't define your path. It only reveals the gap between your perspective and theirs, the gap between your journey and their assumptions, the gap between your growth and their stagnation. And once you see that gap clearly, you start moving differently. You stop internalizing what people think. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into their expectations. You stop letting their small minds shape your big future. You start walking forward with a calm confidence, knowing that your worth doesn't need approval, your value doesn't need validation, and your growth doesn't require their understanding. You realize that their underestimation is not a sign of your weakness, but a sign of their limits. And you keep moving because you know exactly who you are, even when they don't. Losing something valuable can become the moment that forces you to discover the strength you didn't know you had. And it rarely happens in a quiet, gentle way. It happens suddenly, sharply, in a moment when you feel something important slip out of your hands, sometimes because of life, sometimes because of people, and sometimes because of pure injustice. At first, the loss hits you like a shockwave. You stand there trying to understand how something that mattered so deeply could be taken so easily. Your mind scrambles for explanations, searching for a reason, a logic, anything that makes the pain feel less senseless. But there are moments when no explanation can fix what's been done. There are moments when life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just strikes, and those moments reveal a version of you that you never knew was waiting beneath the surface. When the HOA cut down that tree, it wasn't just wood and leaves falling to the ground. It was 2 centuries of history crashing at once. A living piece of your family, your land, your identity, gone in minutes. And the first thing you felt wasn't anger. It was disbelief. The kind of disbelief that makes your chest heavy, your throat tight, your mind blank. You look at what's been destroyed, and for a moment, you don't even know how to react, because the loss feels bigger than your voice in that moment. But that silence doesn't last forever, because when something truly valuable is taken from you, something else rises in its place. Something stronger, something sharper, something that was always inside you but never had a reason to come forward. Loss does that. It pushes you into corners you would have never stepped into willingly. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've ignored, avoided, or underestimated. You start realizing that strength isn't built in peaceful moments. It's built in the moments you're forced to stand, even when your world feels shaken. You learn that resilience isn't a skill, it's a reaction. It appears the moment life tries to break you. And sometimes, loss is the only thing strong enough to activate that reaction. You don't choose to be strong. Strength chooses you. It rises out of you when everything else feels like it's falling apart. What makes loss powerful is that it strips away all the noise. It clears your path by removing the things you thought you depended on, so you can finally see who you are without them. You stop caring about distractions, you stop caring about opinions, you stop caring about the small, meaningless worries that used to occupy your mind. Pain sharpens your focus. Pain wakes you up. Pain turns your attention toward what actually matters. And in that clarity, you begin to see possibilities you were too comfortable to notice before. People sometimes mistake loss for weakness, but the truth is, loss is often the birthplace of a stronger, clearer, more determined version of yourself. When you lose something valuable, you also lose the fear of losing, and that alone is powerful. Suddenly, you stop living cautiously. You stop holding back. You stop allowing small minds, small rules, or small people to influence your decisions. You're no longer intimidated by consequences because you've already faced one of the worst outcomes. Once you experience real loss, the things that used to scare you don't hold the same power anymore. You discover courage you never practiced. You discover a fire inside you that was never lit before. You discover that you are capable of rebuilding, capable of fighting, capable of rising far beyond what you believed. People often think strength is visible, muscles, power, confidence, but the real strength is invisible. It's the moment you decide to stand your ground, even when no one is standing with you. It's the moment you feel pain but choose not to break. It's the moment you're pushed down but refuse to stay there. Losing something valuable exposes this hidden strength. It shows you that you're not defined by what you lost. You're defined by how you respond to it. You realize that loss can knock you down, but it can also wake up a version of you who refuses to be defeated. Sometimes the loss of something valuable shifts your entire direction. It pushes you toward actions you never would have taken otherwise. It motivates you to demand justice. It drives you to protect what you have left. It teaches you to appreciate what still remains. It forces you to grow in ways you didn't plan but desperately needed. This growth doesn't happen slowly. It happens like a jolt, a moment, a snap inside your mind that says, enough. Enough being silent, enough being underestimated, enough allowing others to dictate your boundaries, enough allowing circumstances to steal your peace. Loss becomes a catalyst, a turning point, where your inner strength stops whispering and starts speaking louder than the world around you. And through it all, you begin to understand something profound. Strength isn't something you find after the pain ends. Strength is something you uncover while the pain is still there. It's born in the same moment the loss happens. It grows in the same breath where your heart feels heavy. It rises even when you don't feel ready. And the more you face, the more you lose, the more you rise, the more you realize that your strength was never missing. It was just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Sometimes the injustice meant to break you becomes the spark that transforms you into someone unstoppable. And you don't realize this truth until life hits you with something so unfair, so outrageous, that it forces you to see yourself in a completely new way. It's strange how injustice works. It doesn't just hurt you, it challenges your identity. It forces you to decide whether you're going to let someone else's wrongdoing define your direction, or whether you're going to rise so far above it that the injustice becomes the very reason you grow into your strongest form. And this transformation doesn't begin in a moment of peace. It begins in the heat of anger, disappointment, shock, confusion. Those raw emotions that surge through you when you witness someone crossing a line they had no right to cross. Think about that moment when you stood in front of the stump that used to be your 200-year-old tree, a piece of history that had stood longer than the entire HOA itself. Generations passed under its shade. Family stories lived in its roots. Beauty, legacy, identity, all reduced to a pile of wood chips because someone decided they had the authority to make that call. You didn't choose this fight. You didn't go looking for conflict. But injustice has a way of choosing you, pulling you into battles you never imagined. And in that moment, as frustration tightened your chest and disbelief clouded your mind, something deeper awakened. Not just anger, purpose. Not just emotion, clarity. Not just reaction, transformation. Injustice forces you to confront who you are when everything feels unfair. It forces you to ask yourself whether you'll let the wrongdoing define your silence or inspire your voice, whether you'll shrink in frustration or expand in power, whether you'll let people walk over your boundaries or whether you'll draw lines so bold that no one ever dares to cross them again. And the most powerful thing about injustice is this: it reveals a version of you that was always there, but never needed to step forward until now. You start realizing that transformation doesn't come from comfort. It comes from discomfort, from the moments when you feel disrespected, from the moments when you're pushed too far, from the moments when someone takes something precious from you. Because when everything stays easy, you don't grow. You stay still. But when unfairness strikes, it forces you to rise with a strength that surprises even you. The version of yourself that emerges is sharper, more alert, more confident, more determined. You move differently, you speak differently, you think differently, and you stop apologizing for protecting what belongs to you. Sometimes injustice is the fire that burns away your hesitation. It burns away the doubts and fears that kept you quiet. It burns away the parts of you that accepted less than you deserved. It pushes you beyond your limits and shows you how powerful you can be when you have something to fight for: a cause, a purpose, a reason that fuels you to stand tall, even when your emotions are heavy. You stop being passive. You stop letting things slide. You stop believing that staying silent keeps the peace. You realize that real peace comes from facing the injustice head on, not avoiding it, and through that process, something incredible happens. You grow stronger in ways that go far beyond the situation itself. It's not just about the tree anymore. It's about your voice, your dignity, your boundaries, your rights, your resilience. You realize that if you can stand your ground in this moment, you can stand your ground in any moment. You discover that the courage you used to think you lacked was always within you, waiting for a situation powerful enough to pull it out. Transformation happens when you recognize that injustice isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your evolution. It becomes the spark that forces you to rise above the version of yourself that would have stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed unseen. It becomes the moment that shifts your mindset from victim to fighter, from passive to powerful, from controlled to unstoppable. You stop trying to convince people of your worth because you start living in a way that makes your worth undeniable. You stop allowing other people's decisions to determine your direction because you start walking with a purpose that cannot be interrupted. And slowly, you begin to appreciate what this moment awakened in you. You begin to understand that some injustices don't happen to destroy you. They happen to introduce you to your true strength. They happen to give you a reason to rise. They happen to remind you that you are not meant to stay small. They happen to fuel you with a fire that cannot be put out by fear, doubt, or negativity. You start seeing yourself not as someone who was wronged, but as someone who was awakened. The version of you who stood before the injustice is not the same version standing after it. You come out wiser, bolder, clearer, and fiercer. And the world begins to sense that shift. They see the change in your posture, the confidence in your tone, the conviction in your actions. You become someone who doesn't just survive the injustice, you use it. You turn it into fuel. You turn it into momentum. You turn it into a reason to rise far beyond what anyone expected. And that is how an injustice meant to break you becomes the spark that transforms you into someone unstoppable.